40 de ani de prietenie îl leagă pe Părintele Alex, așa cum este el cunoscut în America, de președintele Statelor Unite, Joe Biden. Respectul reciproc și valorile comune i-au unit pe cei doi și au construit temelia unei relații care a trecut firesc din sfera profesională în cea personală. Aflăm astăzi că simplitatea este cea mai bună cale în viață, indiferent dacă ești preot sau liderul unei mari puteri. Sunt Cristina Cileacu. Începe Pașaport Diplomatic. Father Alex, as you are well known in the United States, welcome to Diplomatic Passport.
It's my honor to be here, Cristina. It's a blessing being with you today. Thank you.
Father, you have a very long relationship with the President of the United States, Joe Biden, and his family. Tell us, how did you start this relationship and how is developed right now? You still meet with the President of the United States, and what do you discuss about?
You know, it's very interesting. In the United States, we all come from different faith persuasions, and there's an interest of being involved in the Congress and in the White House. Archbishop Iakovos, the famous archbishop in America who marched with Martin Luther King at Selma, Alabama, in 1976 Jimmy Carter was elected, and then what occurred is that Jimmy Carter did not invite him to the inauguration. And he had been at inaugurations of Nixon and Lyndon Johnson and Kennedy. And he said to me, I want you to get involved in government relations. And then in 1977, I began my contacts with the Oval Office. I developed them through friendships. It's always about meeting people and treating people with respect. And if you don't look at people as stumbling blocks, they become stepping stones. And you always have to respect the stepping stone. So when I went to visit Jimmy Carter, I did not go visit the president. Everybody wanted to go to the president. I went to the doorman, to the gardener. I went to the one who served the water or the wine. And I said hello to the secretary or to the assistant. And then what they did is what people normally do. They'd say to the president, wasn't that Father Alex a nice guy? And so I basically believe in treating people with respect. That initial contact led for me to develop a relationship with the Oval Office that has been with 8 presidents. I've been in the Oval Office with Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush, Bill Clinton, George Walker Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and of course Joe Biden. Joe Biden I met in the 80s. He was a senator, and we were concerned about the issue specifically of Greek-Turkish relationships, the ecumenical patriarchate, the Cyprus matter. And Greeks, like Romanians, are hardworking people, but we had more Greeks in the United States than the Romanians did, and we went into the businesses, restaurant business, shoe shine business, then we got doctors, lawyers. So many of them knew Joe Biden. They introduced me. He was from Delaware, and we became friends. And when he decided to run in 1988 for President of the United States, the Greek friends of mine, a Jewish guy and a Greek guy, said, we'd like you to meet Joe Biden. And we met in New York, and he asked me to help him. The problem was Michael Dukakis was running in 1988, and so I got my Greek-American friends to agree that for every $3 we'd raise for Dukakis, we'd raise $1 for Joe Biden. So you put politics and money together, and so it opens up a few doors in relationships. We still kept our relationship up. And we were always friendly, very respectful. Then I met Beau Biden. Beau is an extraordinary human being, a great deal of love and compassion, became the Attorney General. And when he was running, Joe Biden asked me to help his son, as he helped many others. But as you are a father or a mother, what you do for yourself, someone does something for you, appreciate it. Someone does something for your child, you appreciate it twice as much. So we did it for Beau Biden, and Joe Biden always loved me for that. Beau Biden was a friend of mine, and he was a friend of my son Michael's and my wife Santi. And he was actually going to do an event at my son's restaurant in Philadelphia. Beau Biden started to get sick then, got cancer in the brain.
Yeah.
Instead of Beau Biden coming, Joe Biden came as Vice President of the United States, representing his son.
Did you help the family to get over the loss of Beau Biden?
I did with Hunter. One that I spent time with was Hunter Biden.
There is this question mark in the United States regarding the next election, if Joe Biden will run or not. What would you advise the president, to run for the second mandate or not?
I think ultimately that's a decision that the president has to make with his family.
Absolutely.
And I would say that, you know, follow your heart. I think he achieved his dream. It is a very taxing position, President of the United States. These are very difficult times. We're emerging from the COVID crisis, but the crisis is still there. There's so many other situations that are occurring. If he wants to run, I'll support him. I would think he's like me. I'm 77, he's 79, he'll be 80. He could enjoy life a little bit more, but he loves politics. And he really, it was a great pain for him to see our country being divided. I don't think, if he sees that he brought the country together, I think he'd be more than happy to leave. If the country is not together, then he will feel it's something undone, and knowing him, he'll want to complete the job. And that means a lot to him.
From your perspective, you are a priest. Do you see that America is coming together, or it's still very much divided?
It's very, very much divided. I am so shocked of what's occurred. We have the AOC segment, which is the cancel culture. And then we have the far-right insanity segment, which is the denial culture. The ones who deny that January 6th, America was under attack by its own people. And for people to imagine compromising the Constitution and the law of the land and thinking it's right goes to show you how much they're denying reality. To show you how kind of a person I am, I reached out to a friend of mine who's Greek Orthodox, a Republican. And I said to him, do me a favor. I said, reach out to Liz Cheney's team, and I would like to do a fundraiser for Liz Cheney. So a couple of weeks ago, we had a fundraiser in Connecticut for Liz Cheney, because I believe speaking truth to power. And you know, Romania is part of a world, the Iron Curtain, the communist world. And how many people could go up and say to a dictator, like Ceausescu, what you're doing is wrong for the country. Put the country first, not your power. Put the people first. You can't do that. Well, America was finding itself into this. We can never allow demagoguery to lead to a dictatorship. And I believe that Joe Biden is doing his best to bring people together, and we're looking for that. I think it's moving in that direction.
You know very well Joe Biden, and what I know about Joe Biden is that his experience in politics is extremely heavy. Do you think that the politicians we see today in the rest of the world, in Europe, are politicians like this model of having politics first and their person, their power second?
Well, I think you got to look at each political leader in relationship to their backgrounds. but I think in relationship to their values. I try to determine leadership by values. Do they believe in things that are transcendent? And I'm going to say this, it's a simple thing you say in philosophy. Some believe in the love of power, and others believe in the power of love. Putin has now proven himself that he loves power. And I have seen others who do believe in the principle of love as being relationship for their own country, but the countries of the world. And so I admire those leaders. Margaret Thatcher was a very tough woman, but people don't know it. She was a very devout Christian woman. And I met her a couple of times during the Ronald Reagan eras. A great political, religious leader, John Paul II. How can we forget what he did with Poland and Romania? So I always look for people, what are their values, and if they believe in those values and willing to sacrifice part of themselves to achieve what's best for the country.
We see a lot of crises, and it's very difficult for ordinary people to solve these crises because they are created by events that cannot be controlled, like wars, like developing of economies and so on. So, at the same time, we see that leaders are, let's say, somehow eager to keep the power, not necessarily to solve the issues for the people. Do you think we still work around values, or it's a fight for...
Well, there's no doubt about it that once you're in power,
you want more.
It's an aphrodisiac.
Yeah.
You want to stay in power. That's why it's very important what we have in the United States, 2 terms of a president. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected 4 times, and it was during his 4th term that they established a 2-term, 8 years, 2 terms or 10 years. It was George Washington who set the precedent in the United States that we should not be kings. I think that kind of a tradition should be in all leaders within these governments, because not only does the leader want to stay in power, but the people who are around the leader wants to stay in power. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's not only Putin, but it's all of those people.
It's the gang.
The gang that goes around. So the gang happens in all of those worlds, and that's what I think is very dangerous.
We live in a century where image is much more important than character, than your true self.
Mother Teresa, when she talked about the United States, she says the greatest disease in America is loneliness. And how many people who have cut themselves off, like what we're doing now, face-to-face dialogue. Instead of doing that, you will see them sitting on the couch. I have grandchildren, 2 grandchildren, sitting on the couch, talking to their friends rather than each other. And yet they love each other, so there's a disconnect. And I'm always concerned that they're more wrapped up in the image of the other than understanding the self. Socrates said, you can't know thyself if you're running away from you. So you've got to go in yourself. I remember Mircea Eliade, he was such a powerful force. I was an existentialist when I was going through seminary, and so he was one of the great scholars that we would read. And you need to develop that of the character. You need to find meaning and purpose in your existence. I think that what happens, it's comfortable to go outside of yourself. But once you can go into yourself, then you find the peace of mind and the harmony that you can deal with the other.
But we have this tendency of running away of ourselves.
That's right.
And we are always looking for shiny things somewhere else.
That's why it's very important. That's what's called fool's gold. We have a treasure in our faith. Do you know Gandhi, the great peace leader? Do you know who inspired Gandhi to do the nonviolence? Tolstoy spoke to Gandhi. Gandhi then, of course, influenced Martin Luther King Jr. Gandhi had an icon, a picture of Christ, in his office. And they went to him and says, why do you have Christ? He is the greatest human being that ever lived, Gandhi would say. The question is then, why, dear sir, Reverend sir, don't you become a Christian? He says, I would. What stops me are the Christians. So the point is that when we're talking about people coming to light, coming to a calm inner self, we have to be that light. We have to be that inner self. And if we can do that, then we can give peace to others. And especially they need it. What you talked about, I received phone calls from friends of mine around the world through the COVID crisis, and they all had one concern: their own respective children or their neighbors committing suicide. People became so alienated through COVID, the fear that enveloped them was paralyzing their spirit. And then they were living in fear. True love casts out fear. So if you have fear, do you have true love? They're all related. And they said, what could we do? I would always just say, probably the most important thing when someone's in fear is the embrace of the hug. And yet, we don't know how to hug each other anymore. We go, moom, 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 but that's not really hugging each other. Because in the other, you see God. In the other, you see yourself.
If we don't know anymore how to hug each other, do we still know how to talk to each other, or better yet, how to listen to each other?
You're exactly right. And that is the difficulty. So what we need to do, we who are in leadership positions, religious, political, teachers, I think we got to give each other a hug a little bit. The four states, in the United States, you know, the First Amendment says two things: freedom of press, freedom of religion. The press needs to hug a little bit more religion, and religion the press. For some reason, the press is very cynical about the religious leaders, probably because they write about all their sins. And then maybe the religious leaders see some of the sins or hear some of the sins of the press. They don't really communicate. But can you imagine if the press, the power of the press, the power of your camera, the power of the word, of a religious, inspiring presence could touch the lives of others, so we could hug, so we could listen to each other, so we could embrace.
Are people tolerant enough?
I believe, no, they're not tolerant now, because like you said, they're not listening to each other. Socrates, who was considered the smartest man in the world, they said, why are you the smartest man in the world? And he said, one thing I know is I know nothing. And neither, or do they neither. Well, everybody in the world is so smart with their smartphones, one thing they know is they know everything. In the meantime, the smartphone, which we created, has more dominance in our life. It is dominating us rather than we controlling it. Yes, we can go to Google and all this other stuff, but at the same time, it robs us of our presence in our own self. How many times can you have a virtual hug and think you're really being hugged? How can you have a virtual kiss and feel you're being kissed? And I tell it to my grandchildren all the time. I want you to give me a hug. I tell them I'll give you $500, but you got to give me a hug, so you're going to break my bones. Thank God I haven't had to give the $500 yet. They're still too small.
As I said at some point in our conversation, we are facing some deep crisis right now. What is your advice for the people to serve somehow this deep crisis? Again,
I think you got to go back to the beginning of what humanity means, right? It means love. It means embrace. Don't make it complex. And you got to live with the element of hope. In the United States, we are all immigrants, and they all went there with a sense of hope. And they faced great crises. They faced great diseases, great wars. But it was always the ideal of tomorrow, you know, tomorrow, the sun will come out tomorrow. I think that you have to have that. but you need to have a prophetic voice, a prophetic tone in the leaders of the community, which also means the parents. They've got to give hope to their children and say, I'm working this way for you, and tomorrow you'll be better than I am. We've got to give people that sense of hope. And the nations, they cannot just be themselves. It's got to be a greater hope. And at the end, for a priest, you say this, which I try to do every day. I work as if everything depends upon me. I pray as if everything depends upon God. I leave him the impossible. I do the possible. And that's how I live my life.